Madison Square Garden was packed. More than 20,000 people crammed into the stands, screaming as if each voice could decide the outcome of that night. In the center, surrounded by bright lights and cameras, stood two men who carried the weight of the world in their fists. Muhammad Ali, the self-proclaimed the greatest, walked to the ring with a firm stride, but carrying the tension of someone who knew that, on the other side, was a rival who would not back down. Joe Frazier, the unbeaten champion, the man who had already beaten him once, awaited him like a caged bull ready to destroy. The audience wasn't there just to watch a fight. They were there to witness an event that would mark generations. Millions, spread across the planet, glued their ears to the radio or stared at the television screen. It was 1974, and the rematch between Ali and Frazier wasn't just sport. It was politics. It was pride. It was survival. Each punch would carry much more than physical strength. It would carry the stories, wounds, and egos of a divided world. The first time Ali and Frazier faced each other, in 1971, was an earthquake. The world was divided into two camps, those who saw Ali as a hero who defied the system, and those who saw Frazier as a symbol of discipline, silence, and brute force. On that occasion, Ali fell, and the fall wasn't just in the ring eye, it was an open wound to the pride of a man who refused to believe he could be defeated. 3 years later, their rematch promised to be even more brutal. Ali made no secret of his hunger for revenge. He repeated in interviews, "I'm going to prove I'm the real champion." Frazier coldly responded, "He talks too much. In the ring, he'll learn to keep his mouth shut." The two didn't need to hate each other, but they did, and this hatred overflowed, infecting the audience, and made the world believe there was nothing more important happening that night. The ring transformed into a stage where every detail mattered. The crowd in New York roared, but what was most striking was the silence that fell in the seconds before the first bell. It was as if the entire planet had held its breath. In the Philippines, community radio stations broadcast the fight over loudspeakers to entire villages. In London, families interrupted dinner to watch the live broadcast. In Harlem, bars were packed, every glass raised in the air resonating with Ali's name. In the southern United States, others cheered for Frazier as if his victory were an act of affirmation against everything Ali represented. It was impossible to separate boxing from politics, the fight from its social context. Ali was seen by many as the voice of black people, the poor, and those facing racism and exclusion. Frazier, in turn, represented the toughness of someone who overcame poverty silently, without slogans, without speeches, only with clenched fists. When the bell rang, the explosion was immediate. Ali started fast, spinning around Frazier, jabbing as if writing his signature in the air. His dancing style seemed intact, as in the days when he called himself the butterfly that floats and the bee that stings. But Frazier wasn't there to admire movement. He lunged forward, each step accompanied by short, violent punches, as if he wanted to rip out his opponent's heart. The impact echoed through the stadium, and each blow drew screams of pain from the crowd. "Go Ali," some yelled. "Finish him, Frazier," others retorted. Ali smiled, even under pressure. It was a defiant, almost provocative smile that said, "You're not going to knock me down this time." But behind his eyes, there was fear, because Frazier was relentless, and his strength seemed limitless. The drama wasn't just in the punches, but in the looks. In every pause, in every clinch, Ali whispered something in Frazier's ear. He provoked, he called him slow, weak, worthless. Frazier responded only with silence and violence. The cameras captured the sweat dripping, the blood forming on split lips, the dry sound of impacts against ribs. The fight wasn't pretty. It was cruel, dirty, drawn out, and precisely for that reason, it was magnificent, because it wasn't just about who would win, but who would survive the massacre. The world watched, mesmerized. Parents woke their children in the middle of the night just to see two men destroy each other in pursuit of a title that was no longer just a boxing title. It was the title of who would rightfully be called the people's champion. And at the end of the fifth round, when the fight seemed endless, Ali leaned against the ropes, breathing heavily, looking out at the crowd as if searching for strength outside himself. And it was then that the audience realized, the fight wasn't just his. It was for everyone who believed he could get up again. It was for everyone who had fallen and needed to prove they were still standing. That moment transformed the rematch into something bigger than sport. It transformed it into history, and it was just the beginning. Because what was to come that night would challenge not only the physical limits of the two giants, but the very idea of what it means to endure. But neither of them imagined that, before the last bell, there would be moments when the world would believe that neither of them would leave that ring alive. The sixth round began like a battleground with no breathing room. Ali remained light on his feet, but he was no longer the same dancer as before. His heavy body, labored air, and the sweat soaking his gloves revealed the price he was paying. Frazier advanced like a tireless predator, throwing each punch as if it were his last of the night. His left hooks exploded against Ali's ribs, the impact echoing like thunder in Madison Square Garden. The crowd roared with each blow, torn between the expectation of one's fall and the heroic resistance of the other. Ali, leaning against the ropes, absorbed the punishment and responded with sharp words, spewing taunts that only increased his rival's fury. "Is that all you've got, Joe?" he shouted, even as his body cried out for rest. Frazier didn't respond. His silence was crueler than any insult, for it was accompanied by punches that felt like stones crushing bones. With each passing minute, the fight ceased to be boxing and became war. Ali's face began to swell, his right eye squinting from the repeated impact of Frazier's hooks. On the other side, Frazier's nose was bleeding, running into his mouth. But he continued marching forward as if he felt no pain. It was as if two worlds collided within a square of ropes. One represented speed, intelligence, and defiant arrogance. The other, silent brutality, a persistence that needed no words. The audience was mesmerized, knowing they were witnessing something greater than sport. People wept in the stands. In Harlem bars, men pounded the bar with each punch, as if trying to help him resist. On the streets of Manila, children crowded around rusty radios, chanting their favorite's name in unison. In London, families stopped their routine and watched in silence, as if the victory or defeat of one of them could influence their own lives. In the 7th and 8th rounds, Ali showed he still had the stamina to surprise. He backed away, feigned exhaustion, and then unleashed a blistering combination of jabs and straights that hit Frazier squarely. The crowd erupted, believing the fight could change in that instant. "He's coming back," commentators shouted around the world. But Frazier, even dazed, wouldn't go down. Every time he seemed about to fall, he found strength from some dark corner of his soul and attacked again. It was as if both men were feeding on the suffering, transforming it into fuel to stay on their feet. The ring began to stain with blood and sweat, and the cameras captured every detail. The half-closed eyes, the open mouths gasping for air, the bodies colliding like two wild animals trapped in the same cage. The 9th round was a perfect snapshot of what the fight represented. Ali, exhausted, back against the ropes, seemed on the verge of collapse. Frazier advanced, blow after blow, trying to crush his resistance. The crowd believed the end was near. But then, as if by some miracle, Ali reacted. He unleashed 3 lightning-fast jabs and a right hand that shook Frazier's chin. Madison Square Garden shook. It was as if the ground vibrated with the energy of thousands of voices in unison. "Ali, Ali," echoed through the stadium. But before anyone could declare the comeback, Frazier advanced again, absorbing the blows, and returning them with equal intensity. The two stood face to face, exchanging blows without flinching, as if neither could exist without the other. It was a duel that transcended the physical. It was psychological, it was spiritual. And as the 10th round drew to a close, the truth set in. Neither would give up, no matter how much they bled, how much it hurt to breathe, how each blow seemed to take years off their lives. Ali refused to accept defeat again. Frazier refused to be humiliated before the world. Both had surpassed their human limits, and now they fought in a realm where only the soul spoke louder. The audience sensed this and remained entranced. Every punch was accompanied by tears, screams, and profound silence in every corner of the planet. But the scariest part was yet to come, because, in the final rounds, the ring would no longer be just a stage for a fight. It would become a place where life and death seemed to be at stake, and the whole world would wonder if anyone would emerge alive. The blood was already staining the ring, but the real war was just beginning. If you're feeling the intensity of this fight, just imagine what's yet to come. Take this opportunity to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next chapters will show how far a man will go to avoid defeat. The 11th round began before he could breathe again. Ali squared his shoulders, clapped his gloves, and advanced as if the world had been waiting just for that minute. Frazier bent his torso, trying to slip a left hook into the narrow space between elbow and rib. The sound was metallic, dry, a hammer against metal. In the stands, people in suits and caps jumped to the same rhythm, as if the entire city could fit into a single throat. Ali feigned fatigue, danced a short step, stopped, and landed 3 jabs to his opponent's face. Frazier responded with his body, entering the close quarters, shoulder to chest, head down, and the fight became a whirlwind. Time flew by, and no one remembered there was any other topic on the planet. In Lagos, a radio crackled on a wooden table. In Recife, a crowded bar called for silence. In Tokyo, eyes burned in the wee hours. Each blow pierced cables, antennas, and rooftops, reaching living rooms like bottled thunder. And the gong threatened. During the minute's rest, the benches flew in and the towels swept through the hot air. Ali breathed through his mouth, his chest rising high, while someone in the corner said, "Go back to the jab, don't switch short. He wants you stopped." He nodded without looking, as if his own head weighed tons. On the other side, Frazier bit his pad and tapped his foot impatiently, repeating, "Don't let him get away. Close the door." The cutter pressed the cold iron to his eyebrow, and the smell of ointment mingled with the metal and sweat. The bell rang again, and the ring became an island surrounded by voices. Ali returned lightly, arms loose, his gaze trying to pierce his rival's guard. Frazier shortened, weaving the space with short steps and head down. The shock was immediate, jab on one side, hook on the other, and the ropes creaked like rigging in a storm. "Let's go," someone shouted, and the night obeyed. The clock seemed to mock the breath of every man there. Go. The final round arrived like a fire alarm. Ali advanced first. 3 jabs in a row, a sharp right hand, sidesteps, and his face gleamed under the lights. Frazier absorbed it, growled, and went in close, going for the liver with a vicious left. Bodies collided, shoulder to shoulder, glove, 2-rib, and the ring groaned. "Don't stop," someone yelled from the corner. Ali responded with a high combination, left, right, left, and sweat flew in an arc, like liquid sparks. Frazier returned with 2 hooks that warped the air in the stadium. No one sat down, the world was on its feet. On distant radios, the hissing silenced as if even noise had respect. At the Garden, the camera panned over teary eyes, hands in prayer, mouths open without sound, and the two, in the center, continued exchanging blows as if life could fit in. That minute, Ali tried to lock up, leaned against the ropes, whispered in his ear, "It's over, Joe." Frazier shook his head, bit his pad, and responded with silence. The bell seemed distant, but every second hurt like a knife. Final jabs, final hooks, final sidesteps. When the bell rang, no one knew for sure what they had seen, war, dance, or prayer. Both men raised their arms, not out of arrogance, but instinct. Their breaths swayed like a stone in the ring. The silence after the bell felt like a wall. The referee separated them, gathered up his gloves with open hands, and led them both to the corners. Towels, water, ice. No one spoke without looking at the judges. The announcer adjusted his microphone. Security guards formed a circle. Photographers raised their cameras as if they had to stop their own story. In Accra, a radio technician adjusted the antenna on the roof. In Madrid, Ambar changed the channel and was booed. In Buenos Aires, an entire family prayed around the TV. Ali took a deep breath, his face swollen and shiny, and whispered to himself, "That's enough." Frazier cracked his neck, slapped his gloves together, and replied hoarsely, "I didn't give you anything for free." The referee took both their hands. In the middle of the world, that gesture seemed to hold to continents. The card count began. Every ear searched for a name. No one dared breathe. The announcer raised the microphone, and the crowd leaned in as if trying to hear a secret. The judges' hands trembled over the cards. The referee held Ali and Frazier by the wrists, to human mountains suspended by a thread of voice. Ladies and gentlemen, the world fell silent. In Harlem, glasses stood still. In Lagos, the radio's hiss seemed to cease. In Tokyo, dawn gripped the air. By unanimous decision, thunder rolled through the garden, and the winner, a second became an eternity, Muhammad Ali. The sound exploded in waves, and the camera captured the exact moment Ali didn't smile. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and simply nodded, as if recognizing the price of the journey. Frazier, a statue of steel, took a step back, bit his pad, and lowered his head. He didn't ask for explanations. He didn't accept consolation. He simply looked at the ring as if it were a harvest field after a storm. The audience, divided, applauded, and booed at the same time, as if the night itself didn't know which side to land on, and it did. In the corner, the ice crackled inside the plastic bag. Ali sat, arched his back, and let his trainer place a hand on his shoulder. "You brought back the jab." He nodded once, unsmiling. His right eye throbbed, his ribs burning, begged for silence. On the other side, Frazier removed his pad, spat red on the towel, and rose without drama. He walked past Ollie with firm steps. There was no insult, no hug, just a look that said, "You were better today." Ollie responded with a micro-gesture almost invisible to the cameras, as if accepting an old pact. Journalists surrounded him, microphones in hand, questions firing like arrows. "Is this the end of the rivalry? Are you the people's champion? What next?" Ali breathed, breaking each word in half. "I respect Joe, but my path isn't over yet." Behind them, the ring leaked sweat, blood, and light, and seemed smaller than its size that night. In the corridors, cables, cameras, and hugs crossed while the garden still roared without stopping. The news traveled like sparks on the wind. The next morning's headlines were boldly emblazoned. The fight of the century. It wasn't just a slogan. It was how people explained to their children what they'd seen and felt. Taxi drivers narrated rounds from memory. Waiters staged jabs between tables. Children improvised rings with clotheslines. On neighborhood radio stations, announcers repeated the results hoarsely, as if announcing the birth of someone important. Newscasts aired breathless replays, slow-motion footage of sweat and impact, and the world seemed to treasure that night like a family album. Some discussed cards, some swore they'd seen something else, some demanded a rematch. But everyone, somehow, agreed on the essential. That wasn't just boxing, it was memory. And memory, when it hurts and heals at the same time, becomes part of the skin, like a map that never fades. In simple homes and luxury apartments, the post-fight moment became a conversation. Every breath seemed to hear the distant gong and dot in the hotel room. The low lights cast shadows on the walls. Ollie lay, on his side, ice on his ribs, and stared at the ceiling like someone reading a map. Victory wasn't an end. It was a slippery slope. Somewhere, a younger, heavier champion had demolished men with short, axe-like blows. The name circulated in whispers. George Foreman. Ollie knew it. If he wanted the entire throne, he'd have to climb over a wall. "Today was war," he murmured, "but the storm is still coming." He thought of his own body, of the speed that was no longer infinite, of the breath that was already taking its toll. He also thought of his mind, of the theater he'd mastered, of the art of making his opponent believe in the impossible. "If I can't be faster, I'll be smarter." The phrase hung in the darkness, like a blade promising to cut tomorrow morning. Rest was part of the plan. The world wouldn't sleep. Outside, phone calls crossed continents, contracts were being signed, and an African city appeared in rumors as the stage. And the next morning, the streets were still bustling with traffic. But something seemed out of place, as if a detail of the planet had shifted. The newspapers showed photos of two swollen faces and a respect that anger couldn't erase. Ollie walked slowly among fans, signed programs, lifted a child in his arms, and left a message in the air. It's not over yet. The rematch against Frazier had given the world a mirror, courage, stubbornness, pain, and the certainty that dignity can exist even when two men try to destroy each other. The previous night clung to the skin of the century like a letter stamp. But, between the lines, there was another message. The road continued on, violent, luminous, demanding. The body begged for rest. The soul, a stage. Soon, another crowd would raise antennas, other radios would blare, and a distant jungle would call out the name of a champion. Ollie closed the bedroom door and prepared for silence. And on the horizon, a champion appeared, a thunderclap with a name in gloves. The next step would be fatal. Him. The next morning, the city looked the same, but everyone walked as if they'd just emerged from an earthquake and could still hear the gong inside. Stacked newspapers screamed in bold letters that the rematch between Ollie and Frazier had become the fight of the century, and it wasn't an exaggeration. The entire planet had watched two champions test the limits of body and soul. In Harlem, waiters reenacted jabs between tables. In Lagos, mechanics adjusted rusty radios to listen to reruns. In London, families rewatched the broadcast as if it were a relative's wedding. Frazier walked silently to his car, his head down, but straight, and that said a lot. He'd lost the night, not the greatness. Ollie, still swollen, waved slowly. Neither triumph nor poise, just respect for his rival who was also a champion. International phone calls were non-stop. Contracts were being signed at the same pace as the sweat that still dripped from the ring. And the feeling was unique. That night would not be forgotten because it reminded the world why it was worth staying on your feet. In the hotel room, the ice crackling against his ribs became the metronome of a new plan. Ali repeated softly that the fight with Frazier had brought back more than just a result. It had restored rhythm, confidence, and drama. If the body was already taking its toll, the mind could still set traps. Promoters knocked on the door, phones rang, and one name lingered in every conversation: George Foreman, the punch that felled trees. To face such a bull, it would take more than light steps. It would take making the world believe along with it, and the world responded. On Kinshasa radios, the news arrived like a drumbeat. In fan letters, the word Africa sparked curiosity. In the corridors of broadcast stations, the promise of another historic night was heard. The rematch against Frazier had become a bridge. On one side the wounded past, on the other a horizon that called for courage and cunning. Ali slept little, and woke lighter. The next day he returned to the gym and vowed to use ropes as shelter and fatigue as bait. The city returned to its din, but there was a new gentleness in the air, as if that night had taught limits and greatness simultaneously. Ali's phone didn't stop ringing. Frazier's didn't either, because, in truth, the world understood. Two men emerged greater than they entered. The images repeated on TV showed more than blows. They showed glances, minimal gestures, the moment one breathes and the other decides to stand. Children imitated, jabs in the backyard. Old men recognized the weight of time. Women, who always saw beyond the noise, noted the respect that overcame hatred. The fight returned the word dignity to the sport, and that doesn't fit on a poster. The nickname fight of the century stuck because it spoke a simple truth. Sometimes, to heal a wound, you have to go through it. Ali won. Frazier wasn't defeated from within, and it was from this double thread, victory and respect, that history stretched the bridge to the next abyss. On the other side, Foreman's name rang out like metal, and a distant jungle lit up with lights. Years later, those who lived through that night still find a shadow of silence when the subject comes up again, because it wasn't just about fists, it was about losing and coming back, about speaking loudly and, in the end, knowing how to listen, about carrying your own body when it weighs too much, and still finding space for a gesture of respect. That revenge that stopped the world taught the invisible: falling isn't the end. Hatred doesn't build. Courage is repeating the step when the ground burns. Every crackling radio, every shaky TV, every bar packed with teary-eyed people told the same parable with different accents. No one wins alone, and no one loses alone. Ali took the cards. Frazier took the eternity of those who don't back down, and the world took a mirror. When an entire crowd holds its breath for two men, it's not because they enjoy violence, it's because they recognize in them their own daily struggle for dignity. If there is a lesson, it fits in a simple sentence: keep standing, even when the bell seems far away, and take another breath.